But before we dive into the disturbing tales of the night, let me ask you, do you have the courage to stay until the end? Most viewers don't subscribe to the channel, perhaps out of oversight, or perhaps because after hearing these stories, they never slept the same way again. If you think you can handle it, click subscribe now. I always take the red line of the Chicago L, heading north to Howard. Anyone who lives here knows rush hour is hell. But that day, I managed to catch the train right at the beginning of the line at 95th Dan Ryan, so I got a seat right away. It was the individual seat, stuck to the back of the car. My favorite, because no one bumps into you. As the train continued through the stations, it filled up. People getting on and off. Until at the SOX 35th station, an old man got on, already elderly, a cane in his hand, looking tired. I gave up my seat without thinking twice. He thanked me with a nod and slowly settled in. It was at that moment that I noticed something strange. He was missing the index finger on his right hand. At the time, I thought it was curious, but I continued my journey. After all, a work accident, diabetes, who knows? Chicago has thousands of stories. It was then, holding onto the metal bar to balance myself, that I noticed something else. The girl next to me, leaning against the same bar, was also missing the index finger on her right hand. My stomach sank a little. Coincidence, I thought. But I couldn't help but look discreetly around. That's when the chill hit my spine. Every person on that train car, every single one, was missing the index finger on their right hand. Old, young, suit-wearing, working-class students, all of them. And worse, they were all looking at me, more precisely at my right hand holding the bar with all my fingers intact. The train continued. The metallic noise seemed louder, and that feeling of being in the wrong place washed over me. No one spoke. No one was on their cell phones. They just looked at my hand, as if I were a piece out of place. At the next station, Fullerton, I jumped out before the doors even opened completely. I didn't look back. Since that day, I have never taken that train at that time again. In fact, I avoid going through Fullerton as much as possible, because even today, whenever I remember that train car, I keep thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't gotten off. This happened about 2 weeks ago, but I still can't stop thinking about it. I live in Boston, and for those who know it, I take the Blue Line every day, heading towards Wonderland, the final station. That day, I caught the train at Aquarium Station, going home after work. It was about 10 at night, the subway still quite busy. I was talking on the phone with a colleague, telling her about a bizarre meeting we had, when I commented to her, "When I get to Wonderland, the call will cut out. It always cuts out in the final tunnel." She laughed. She already knew how it was. But then, that's when everything got strange. The train arrived at Wonderland, and the call didn't cut out. I thought, wow, a signal miracle. I got off the train car, went up the escalators, and realized I wasn't in Wonderland. I was back at Maverick Station. I thought I was distracted, that I took the wrong train, but I swear to God, I remember getting off at Wonderland, the same final station I always take. I told my friend. She was confused, laughing nervously on the other end of the line. I said I was going to try again. I waited for the next train. I got on, sat down, the subway continued its journey. We arrived in Wonderland, but when I got off, I looked around and again I was in Maverick. This time there wasn't a single soul on the platform. No sound, no trains coming in the opposite direction, nobody at the counter, nobody at the turnstile. The stores closed, everything silent, as if it were a ghost station. My friend kept asking on the phone where I was, but the call started to fail. Then a train passed. Empty cars, completely. I got on anyway, I just wanted to get out of there. I arrived in Wonderland once more. I looked around, nobody. That station that always has people, even late, now a desert. I started to feel a knot in my chest, as if the air was getting heavy. I ran up the stairs looking for any sign of life. It was only when I heard the sound of the turnstiles spinning that I started breathing again. A policeman appeared, and right behind him I saw some people coming down calmly, as if nothing had happened. I left without looking back. But since that day, I haven't taken the blue line again, because I can't get out of my head that, for a moment, I was somewhere where I shouldn't be. This happened on one of the worst nights of my life. I had just moved to New York, trying to start over. I didn't know the city well yet, but I already understood one thing. Walking alone late at night in some neighborhoods wasn't the best idea. It was a Tuesday around 10 at night. I was helping out at a work event in Brooklyn and was one of the last to leave. It started raining hard as soon as I stepped onto the street. Those icy rains that make you wonder if God is pissed off about something. The nearest subway station was Atlantic Avenue Barclays Center, about a 10-minute walk. But with the rain, every corner seemed deserted. Every shadow seemed bigger. That's when I noticed two people turning the corner ahead of me. The first was too tall, must have been almost 6.5 feet, wearing an old hat, fedora style. The second, smaller, was coming a little behind. The detail that made me uneasy? As soon as they saw me, they both hid behind a wall. I pretended I didn't see and kept walking fast. But in the reflection of a shop window, I realized they had started following me. My heart raced. I had my backpack, laptop inside, cell phone in my pocket. I thought, if I get mugged, I'm screwed. I cut through another street trying to shake them off. I looked back from time to time and clearly saw they were quickening their pace, always looking away, but they weren't hiding it anymore. I ran. I went down the subway stairs without even buying a ticket, jumped over the turnstiles, and hoped no police officer would stop me. I didn't see anyone at the entrance, nobody on the platforms. It was as if the whole station was empty. Just me and those two outside. I got on the first train that appeared on the queue line without even looking at the destination. I just needed to get out of there. I sat down, soaked, my heart racing. I finally looked around, and that's when I realized something wasn't right. The train car was relatively full, but everyone was wearing clothes from another era. Men with hats, women with dresses from the 60s or 70s, even children with those old school uniforms. No one on the train car was wet like me, even with the storm outside. And no one, absolutely no one, was using a cell phone. Everyone was just sitting with fixed eyes. Some were staring at me but without expression. Others seemed to be whispering to each other. A chill ran down my spine. Something in the air was dense, as if time had stopped. I tried to avoid eye contact, lowered my head, pretending to use my cell phone, but even it seemed strange. No signal, no time. When the train stopped at the next station, without thinking twice, I ran out. I didn't even look to see if the two who were following me were there. I went up the station stairs, took the rain in my face again, but I was never so relieved to be back on the street. Since that night, I never take the subway late at night in Brooklyn, and every time I see someone wearing vintage clothes, I make sure to cross the street, just in case. I know this is going to sound completely crazy. In fact, I've already told this story to a few people, and I only get suspicious looks, like, this guy needs help. But I don't gain anything by making this up. I just want to know if anyone has been through something similar. To give context, a few months ago I told you here that I was followed by two strange people on a rainy night in Brooklyn, and that upon entering the subway, I had one of the most bizarre experiences of my life. The train car was full of people wearing clothes from another era. Nobody was on their cell phones, and the atmosphere was wrong. I ran out at the first station. After that, I tried to go on with my life normally. But that feeling that I had escaped something never went away. Cut to a few weeks later. Because of work, I ended up meeting a lady named Margaret, a specialist in energy cleansing. Those people who do aura readings, spirituality, that kind of thing. It wasn't exactly my style, but she was a friend of one of our clients, so I was polite. When she saw me for the first time, she didn't say anything. She just kept watching me with a strange, serious expression. After the meeting, she called me aside and said, "Can I tell you something? I don't know if you believe in this kind of thing, but you need to pray. Now." I laughed, thinking it was just sympathy. But she continued, "When I saw you, it was as if there was an enormous weight on you, as if you had one foot on the other side. Something is chasing you, something that should have taken you already." I went cold. I tried to laugh, but I asked, "What do you mean by that?" She looked into my eyes and said, "I don't know what happened to you, but you should already be dead." At that moment, all that came to me was that night on the subway. The strange people, the empty faces, the train that seemed stopped in time. I asked what I could do. She told me to keep one thing in mind. Sometimes when death fails, it comes back to finish the job. Since then, I avoid walking alone at night. I avoid the subway when I can. But sometimes, when I'm about to sleep, I swear I feel something, like someone is waiting for the right time, and I wonder if that night on the subway I really managed to escape, or just postponed the inevitable. This happened almost 2 years ago, but I can't forget it. I've never told anyone, because whenever I try to explain, it seems too simple. But those who have lived it know it wasn't. I was on the Green Line of the Boston subway, returning home on a Sunday afternoon. It was raining, and since it was the weekend, the train wasn't that crowded. I got on the car at Government Center Station, sat down, and started using my cell phone, as I always do. Everything normal. Around Park Street Station, an elderly lady got on. She was walking slowly, using a worn bag, and seemed kind of tired. She stopped in front of me and asked, "Young man, may I sit?" Of course, I gave up my seat without thinking. She thanked me and sat down. We continued our journey, and when we arrived at Kenmore Station, I saw her get up, adjust her bag on her shoulder, and get off the train car. I went back to my cell phone. The train continued for 2 more stations. Then again I heard, "Young man, may I sit?" I looked up, and it was the same lady. Same clothes, same bag, same tired expression. It froze my stomach. I was speechless for a second, but I gave up the seat again. She thanked me in the same way, sat in the same place. I looked out the window, trying to understand. I discreetly looked at the other passengers. No one seemed to notice anything strange. The train continued as if nothing had happened. But I knew there had. At the next station, I got off without even looking at the name. I just needed to get out of there, feel the air. I stood on the platform for a while, trying to understand. To this day, I don't know what happened. If it was a lapse, a mistake in time, or something that has no explanation. But every time I get on that train, I always think, what if that time I hadn't gotten off? Would I still be trapped there, in that same moment, hearing that same voice, forever? This happened to me in 2005 in Chicago, and I haven't been able to forget it. I've never told this openly because, well, who would believe it? At the time, I worked near Clark Lake Station. I took the subway every day at the same time, same train car, almost always seeing the same people. That day, like any other, I got on the train, sat down, and started using my cell phone, distracted. But when we were approaching the next station, I smelled a terrible odor in the air. A strong smell of dirt, mold, something that stuck to the nose. I raised my head and saw a man entering the train car. He looked like a homeless person. He was wearing torn clothes, carrying an old bag slung over his shoulder. The smell was coming from him for sure. The people around discreetly moved away, trying to ignore it. I also thought about getting up and changing cars, but for some reason, I stayed there. He slowly walked down the aisle, and when he got close to me, he stopped. He looked me in the eyes. That look went right through me. It was as if he saw straight into my head. Then he said, in a hoarse voice, "It's not going to work." I froze. He didn't explain. He just continued, "The treatment. It's not going to work. It will happen when it's time, not when you want it." My heart raced, because at that exact moment, I was undergoing fertility treatment. I had been trying to get pregnant for months. I hadn't told anyone, much less a stranger on the subway. Before I could ask anything, he simply continued walking through the train car, as if nothing had happened. I got off at the next station, my heart pounding. I spent days trying to forget, convincing myself that it was just a coincidence, just random words from a disturbed man. But weeks later, I found out that the treatment had failed, and a few years later, without any medical assistance, I became pregnant naturally. To this day, I have never seen that man again. But sometimes I wonder, how did he know? And what else did he know about me that he didn't say? This happened last year, and since then, I can't walk peacefully anymore. Every Saturday morning, I used to hike in Griffith Park here in Los Angeles. It's my way of clearing my head after a stressful week. I would climb the trails, run a little, do some exercises, that kind of thing. On this day, I was exploring a more remote part of the park. I'd read online about some less used trails, and of course, I went to venture out. That's when I came near a cave. Small, without signs, looking abandoned. Curious, I approached. As soon as I put one foot in the entrance, he appeared, a huge dog, black as pitch, short-haired, muscular, with eyes that weren't normal. They shone in a strange way, between green and blue like headlights, but kind of dim. The animal simply stopped in front of me, staring at me. It didn't growl, it didn't advance. It just stared at me. And me, frozen. I seemed hypnotized, as if his eyes were pulling me into that darkness. Only when I felt a slight torpor, as if I was going to faint, did I manage to take a step back. I got out of there as quickly as I could, but the worst came later. During the day, at home, I still felt like there was something behind me. That feeling of being watched didn't go away. I went to the market, tried to forget, but every time I turned a corner, I swore I saw a low and heavy shadow disappearing behind me. In the late afternoon, I took the subway, as always. Red line, heading towards North Hollywood. The station was empty for a Saturday. I got on the train, sat in the back of the car. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, slow, heavy, like claws hitting the metal floor. I looked ahead, nothing, but the noise was coming from behind. When I turned to look in the reflection of the window, I swear I saw the silhouette of that same black dog sitting in the middle of the aisle. I don't know how to explain it. It was him, same glow in the eyes. It winked and disappeared. I jumped off at the next station, my heart racing without looking back. Since then, I have never returned to that park. I don't walk alone on the subway late at night either, but sometimes deep down, I feel that he's still nearby, waiting on the next corner. This happened about 5 months ago, but it still gives me chills every time I remember it. It was a Saturday, and I had taken my young son to stroll around downtown New York. We had spent hours in the main library, and on the way back, we took the subway at 34th Street Penn Station, as we always did. So far, so normal. But when we got off at the final station to transfer trains, something strange started. We always took the line home at Queensboro Plaza Station, and it was just a matter of following the signs. But that afternoon, every time we tried to leave, we returned to exactly the same platform. I know it sounds silly. Oh, you got lost. But I know that station. I had taken that route dozens of times, and every time we went up a staircase or turned a corner, We ended up in exactly the same place. The worst part? There was no one there. That station that is always crowded was completely empty. No employees, no passengers, no sound. It was as if we were walking in circles inside a ghost subway. I tried to call my sister, but my cell phone didn't get a signal. It was completely dead, and I swear it was charged minutes before. My son started to cry, saying he wanted to go home, that he was tired. I pretended to be calm, but inside, panic was already taking over. That's when I saw someone coming towards us. It was a skinny boy, very young. He seemed to have come straight from another decade. He was wearing an old jacket, carrying a backpack. He looked at me and said, "It's this way. Go up and turn right." That's all. As if he knew exactly what I needed to hear. Without thinking, I followed what he said. I went up, turned, got on the next train, and suddenly we were at the right station. Normal people, noise, everything as always. The clock said that only about 7 minutes had passed. But to me, it felt like we were trapped in there for hours. When I got home, I looked at old photos of my brother. The boy's manner, the hair, even the backpack were the same as the ones my brother used before he died, years ago. Since then, I have never been able to explain what happened. I only know that that day on that empty subway, I was sure of one thing. If that boy hadn't appeared, maybe my son and I would never have gotten out of there.